Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this Facebook Live event with Alex Gino for Banned Books Week. My name is Peter Coyle, and I'm the director of the Montclair Public Library in New Jersey, and I'm also vice president of the Freedom to Read Foundation. And this event is co-sponsored with the Banned Books Week Coalition, and I am here as a member of the American Library Association, the oldest and largest library association in the world. And one of its core values is intellectual freedom, which is the defense and promotion of the free expression of ideas and materials. Anyone can contact the American Library Association when there's an attempt to remove or ban or censor a book at their library, school, or university. You can find more information at ala.org. And ALA is a proud member of the Banned Books Week Coalition and is happy to be participating in this event today. And we are very glad that Alex Gino has agreed to be with us, and we're looking forward to speaking to them momentarily. But I'd like to have Betsy introduce herself.
Thanks so much, Peter, and welcome everybody who's joining us today. Just a little bit about Banned Books Week. I'm the coordinator for the Banned Books Week Coalition. Banned Books Week itself was launched in 1982 in response to a sudden surge in the number of challenges to books in schools, bookstores, and libraries. Unfortunately, we're still facing challenges today. So Banned Books Week continues to bring together the entire book community: librarians, educators, booksellers, publishers, journalists, artists, and readers of all types in shared support of the freedom to seek and express ideas. The Banned Books Week Coalition is an international alliance of diverse organizations, including the American Library Association, and we're joined in a commitment to increase awareness of the freedom to read. To find out more about the coalition and the resources we provide, please visit us at bannedbooksweek.org. The theme of this year's Banned Books Week is "Censorship is a Dead End. Find your freedom to read." We hope that this year's celebration helps you, your patrons, your students, your friends, your family, everyone find their freedom to read.
Thanks, Betsy. Alex Gino is author of middle grade novels Rick, You Don't Know Everything, Jilly P, and the Stonewall Award winner, George. They love glitter, ice cream, gardening, awful puns, which I think we'll talk about your shirt in a little bit, and stories that reflect the diversity and complexity of being alive. Born and raised on Staten Island, New York, Alex now enjoys living in Oakland, California. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and say something to the audience before we get going?
Hi, I think you just did. Thank you, Peter, Betsy, the ALA, OIF, and everyone for having me here today. I'm just glad to be able to talk about books. That was pretty simple, but that's what I'm doing today, talking about why we need books.
Well, thank you for being with us. We're very happy to have you.
Yes, thank you, Alex. And I just want to let our audience know that we will have a Q&A at the end of the hour. So if you have any questions, just add them to the Facebook chat comments during as we speak, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can.
All right, so let's get started. Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Alex, why, as an author, why is access to information important to you? And how does the lack of information harm readers, and especially the people you write books for, which are younger readers?
Right. I write books for kids, and I honestly believe that kids not only deserve, but need tools for understanding what's going on in the world. Because if you don't have kids who are figuring out about the world, you have adults who don't know about the world. And kids are learning everywhere. They're learning everything. Everything is relatively new to them. So if they experience something, if we experience something early, it's part of what we expect in the world. And so it is vital both for people and young people to see themselves in literature and also to see other folks in literature, right? As Redeem Sims Bishop talks about, mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors. If we don't do that, we have adults who don't know what to do when they, for example, meet a trans person or meet someone that they recognize as trans, that they identify as trans, and that's how trans violence happens. The trans women of color are at frightening levels of risk for injury and death. The average life expectancy for a trans woman of color is about 35. And that's a travesty. And the more that we expose everyone to ideas earlier, the more we can avoid that later.
Great,
So
thank
no
you.
joke, right? It's real.
Yeah, thank you. It's very powerful, a very powerful statement, Alex. Thank you. So when we're talking about information and during Banned Books Week, we talk about censorship in a very hard way. We talk about challenges in bans specifically, but there are also issues with soft censorship. Biases, that we're unaware of, or even overt biases that kind of affect how information is presented. What are some ways in which readers, especially younger readers, are guided away from stories, and how can we prevent it?
We prevent it by, as adults, not doing it. There's so many times where someone says, oh, well, I want a book for a boy, I want a book for a girl, or I want a book for a 10-year-old, or I want a book that is at this lexile level, or I want a book that is this or is that, or I don't want to expose my kids to whatever thing that actually exists in the universe and they deserve to know about and be able to work with and handle at levels that are developmentally appropriate and thoughtfully appropriate. But those are things that kids will self-select for. If a book doesn't make sense, if a book is uncomfortable, if a book is unbearable, they won't read it. So I guess it's just incumbent upon adults, to librarians and booksellers, to have a plethora of books available and ask what a kid is interested in. Ask what a kid wants to read about, as opposed to these designations of what kind of people read what kind of books.
Yeah, Alex, thanks for saying that. That reminds me of in middle school, you had your shop class and your home ec, and there was always kind of an assumption that the girls would take home ec and the boys would take shop class. And I think that's not always true, right? You can learn valuable skills in both. So it's important in our reading that we not segregate or classify what the children want to read, because we don't know, right? It may be the right book for them. Yeah.
Right. And a book doesn't need to reflect them to be an enjoyable book. I read so many books about divorce as a kid in the 80s. My parents were and are happily married. It is like almost embarrassing. They still kiss in public. But divorce was a thing in the world, and I wanted to make sense of it. And books is where I went to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, right? Let's talk a little bit about censorship. There have been several attempts and challenges to remove your award-winning novel from schools and libraries.
Really?
That's what I've been told. Let's talk a little bit about why does that happen? How does it happen? How do you respond? What impact does it have you as an author? And the message that you're trying to get out with your book? I'd love to hear more from you about as an author, how that impacts and affects you.
It makes me sad. It makes me sad because there are kids who could see themselves in my book and would know that they are real and would have access to understanding that they can accept and love themselves so much younger than I did. I found the word genderqueer when I was 19 in a book, and I took it and I ate it and I became it because I already was it. I just didn't know how to say it. And so when you take that away, it creates more potential for harm. It doesn't stop someone from being who they are, but it makes the road to find themselves a lot more painful and scarful. And I think I'm kind of a little veered from what you were asking, but um, but by and large, censorship, especially censorship around kids, happens because there's an adult who's uncomfortable. There's an adult who doesn't know how to have a conversation. There's an adult who doesn't know how to not know stuff. Kids know how to not know stuff. Kids are used to not knowing stuff. And it is a travesty that because an adult is afraid of being uncomfortable in a conversation, there are kids and then later trans adults who are unsafe. And I think a lot about that link between how important it is for those of us with agency to be uncomfortable to help other people be safe.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think all of that's true. Um, has there been one particular instance where your book has been challenged, or have you been not invited to speak somewhere that has really stuck out at you, or some examples of this? And I don't want to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I hope that's okay that I asked this.
Yeah, no, it's great. Because what happens is by and large, I am not invited to speak somewhere unless they've done the work and they've decided they want to have me. Like, I'm not a surprise gay, right? Like, Phil Bildner has been taken out of places because they're like, oh, wait, huh? We didn't know. No. All the gay right here. Like, coming in, you are getting queer content. So it's not that I get taken out, it's that I never get called in the first place. I know other middle grade authors and they do school visits all the time. I do a few a year and I don't seek them out. I wait for them to come to me because I don't want to convince someone I should be there. But there's a lot of places that I presume are having someone else instead because it's easier. What I do usually see is that when it actually hits challenge point, when it actually hits blow up point, the lashback is so much larger than the actual attempt at censorship, because people don't like being told not to look at things. People don't like being told have other people make decisions for them. And so when the Oregon Battle of the Books happened and classes, like, actually it was absurd. There were schools that decided to not have their kids participate in the entire program because one optional book to read had a transgender person in it, which to me just leads to a bunch of fifth graders going, well, why aren't we competing? Like, you could have just left that book off the list and gone, oops. But the more people go that force, that's when the huge lashback is. That's when we had 200 and something people in the small town of Canby, Oregon, coming to see me. It's extremely ineffective when people try.
Just kind of as a follow-up, do you also, like, when there is a widely publicized attempt to ban your work, do you see a bump in sales? There are a few authors out there who are frequently challenged and kind of welcome it because
well, that's the thing, is I don't welcome it, but yes, there's an increase in sales, which is nice, right? In the terms, more in that more kids are getting access to the book, but it's also which kids are getting access to the book, and also which adults are buying the book because they want to find out what salacious thing it was. I mean, it is true that any album that has the parental label on it is gonna, like, get more sales and more whatever than any other thing. But at the end of the day, there's some kid that really needed access to that book that didn't get it. And so I can't enjoy it. Like, it's only 5 years in that I'm able to make a funny shirt about it. It sucks. It really does suck. To, like, not just to, like, oh, my book didn't sell, but, like, my existence who I am is so scary that you will go out of your way to prevent your children from knowing that I exist. I mean, I developed lizard skin in the 80s, like for a reason, but I rely on that lizard skin when stuff like that happens. Yeah.
So
Well,
Alex, I just want to jump in here and point out something very important you just said. It's your books are not salacious. Your books are about people who exist, and they're all around us and every form or fashion. And so it's not that your books are challenged because it's something that that the kids are doing drugs or something. It's about people being and living who they are. And
Right.
and I think what you said is it's scary to people. And I think that goes back to your earlier statement about knowledge and ignorance. And I think that is, I just wanted to make sure that we really underscored that.
Yeah. And thank you. And I want to add to that because what they will do is they will go with a fine-tooth comb and find that line on page 120 something when a character said something about, like, well, I think the most salacious thing in the whole book is someone says, oh, look, so it looks like she started to grow some balls. They say he, but like, okay, yeah, that's like a thing that a person might notice, but you had to look real hard to go find it. You had to comb to find it. And why were you doing all that combing? Because you're not combing all the books. You chose, like, you were going to take this book down and you were going to find the way to do it with.
well, and I just want to add, like, the specific targeting of identity, and the fact that you have to wear an armor as a trans person, and so many kids who are in the similar situation, so many queer kids. This is the reason we need books like George, and we need to continue to fight the censorship of them. So just to continue on, censorship is something we also suffer internally. You're very outspoken, but do you ever feel the urge to self-censor when you're writing for this audience? And how do you overcome that urge? If you don't feel the urge, do you have advice for other writers out there who might be experiencing it?
It's kind of funny, and it kind of piggybacks on what I was just saying about what is in Melissa's story, which is what I call George. When I was writing it, I had never been published. I didn't really know about the publishing world. I put things in my book and I figured that if they were a problem, an editor would say something. And my editor didn't say anything because they're not a problem. But I didn't realize that there would still be people who would think it's a problem. And I didn't have it in my head that the book would have the reach that anyone would notice. Because when I was first writing it in 2003, I thought I was going to like go to Kinko's and like make photocopies because that's how we did things then, right? So I didn't really self-censor. And then as I was writing my next book, I was like, oh, well, should I not put that in because someone might complain? And then I remembered that no matter what I put in, someone's going to comb and find something to complain about. People complain that I wrote about tampons in Melissa's story. That is one of like under the what I hear from ALA, right? Like you guys told me, one of the reasons was that I mentioned tampons. Half of the people reading the book use or will use tampons, and the other half came from someone who does or did, right? Like it just, it's so infuriating that no, I can't even play that game. What I can do is play the game with myself where I have already self-censored before I realize I've done it. My first book is about a binary trans kid who is extremely traditionally binary. And a lot of that was it was a story I could figure out how to write 15 years ago. I didn't have the concept that there would be non-binary kids who could name themselves in fourth grade. So like that's the kind of self-censorship that I'm facing, the recognizing that how I've experienced the world doesn't have to be how I write the world.
There have let me just form my thoughts here. You've talked about how libraries, schools, and stuff um, talk about challenges. Um, and we've seen a lot of challenges towards classic books, old books like Huckleberry Finn or Huck Finn and Catcher in the Rye. Um, what are what's happening in that case? What's being missed, and how can we change the engagement of that to reach a broader audience?
To me, the biggest problem with that is it says that banning books is something we used to do. Banning books is an old problem, right? And it comes from librarians who those are the books that were banned when they were young, perhaps. Those are the books that were they had trouble when they were in high school or whatnot. But they're not the reasons why books are being banned now. Books are being banned. If you look at the top 10, half of it is about queer kids. Those books didn't exist 20 years ago, so they're not what were being banned 20 years ago. Like The Great Gatsby, who cares? I don't even, it's probably banned for some stupid thing or other, but it's not stuff that we care about or worry about now. Like, it's not what we fear. Like, the Bible was banned over and over and over again, and now it barely even makes the list because people are way too focused on this queer panic thing. And then occasionally, anytime that a young woman wants to engage in sexuality, that is also disastrous. You can't have that. But that's what we're facing. So that's what we should be talking about when we talk about banned books. It is an active event. It is a now event. And yeah, it reeks of It's All Better Now when Catcher in the Rye is put up as a banned book. Because it's not all better now. It's just different books that we're focused on.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned that. I hadn't thought about, but it's almost as if the why a book is banned is kind of a time capsule of the social mores of the time, right? Which
Yep.
is interesting. I had never really thought about that. So that's really an interesting thing, you know. I remember when a couple years ago, around the same time as George, David Levithan's Two Boys Kissing came out. And that's a fictionalization of an actual event that happened, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so again, talking about, people existing, in 20 years, will people look back at George and those sorts of books and think, oh, what was the big fuss about, or in 30 years?
That's the goal, right? That's the goal. And there are kids now who are like, what is the big fuss about? Which is great. Also about David Levithan, who is fantastic. And I think that is my favorite book of his, Two Boys Kissing. That's the book that gets banned because it literally says two boys kissing and people freak out. And there's two boys on the cover kissing and people freak out. I have news for the people who freak out about that book. All of David's books have gay content. All of them. Like, he's very gay too. And so like it's this thing where also like what other books that have trans content didn't hit someone's radar, so they don't hit the list. But Zenobia July came out last year. And that's got like all sorts of queer characters 2 years ago. Oh golly, that's got all sorts of queer characters and trans characters and a Uncle Sparkles and all this stuff. But it didn't hit the radar of the people who got offended, so it doesn't cause the uproar, so it doesn't hit the list. It's all about scandal. It's all about what hits someone's emotions. And it's manipulative.
Just to comment on that, when we hold up these classics like Huck Finn and The Catcher in the Rye, I think it's also a reflection of those of us who are advocates. We try to be aware of what we're doing, but often people gravitate to the books that they grew up reading, and we don't understand the audience that we're speaking to as well. That this is an audience that has a different, to them, they're going to have different classics.
Yeah, this is an audience for whom 9/11 is a historical event.
So, kind of in this vein, what advice do you have for librarians, educators, and booksellers who want to ensure that not just their Banned Books Week coverage is diverse, but that their collections include diverse queer identities?
This is going to sound real trite, but read diversely, read more diversely. And look at reviews, especially reviews from marginalized communities, reviews from the people that the book are about. What is it, the LGBT Roundtable or the GLBT Roundtable, whatever it is at the ALA, puts out the Rainbow List every year. And it's just all of the quality books with LGBTQIA content. It's not the award winners, it's not whatever, it's just all the good books. All these books are good representation. Get those in your library. Display them in your library. Don't hide them in a special corner. And don't put little rainbow stickers on them, because then the kid who takes them home has a big rainbow sticker on the book, and maybe that's not safe. What you can do is put a rainbow slip of paper in it so that when you're browsing, you can see the rainbow, but you can take it out before you actually borrow the book. Those are some recommendations.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I actually, as you said, I'm like, wow, how come I haven't thought of that before? That's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
It's because this is my job, as I think about this stuff.
Even I learned something today, so this is great.
Woo!
We talked a little bit about challenges to your books and the issue with the Battle of the Books in Oregon. Have there been any cases where challenges or concerns about your book were overcome, where the book was then included or not removed, or anything that you're aware of where it's a positive outcome?
I mean, most challenges fail, right? We call it Banned Books Week, but mostly what gets collected are challenges. And a challenge is when someone has gone to the library or the school or the whatever and said, take this book out, it's not appropriate. I don't know the exact percentages. One of you might know. Most of the time it fails. And then what happens is that there's more publicity for the books and more people read it. I think my favorite perhaps might be in Kansas. Because, and I'm going to name drop here because this actually happened. There was a school in Wichita, and this is the sad and terrible part, there was a trans kid who used the bathroom and there was a panic. And I believe the school closed for 2 days in order to figure out what to do, which to me is the most absurd reaction in the world. The kid and family actually ended up moving to another state. They were like, we don't even want this anymore. We don't even want to work with you. But Catherine Applegate, right, stepped in and said, this is unacceptable. And she worked with them and paid to fly me into Kansas, to fly her into Kansas, and to buy books for basically the entire Wichita schools district. And we went and had a huge event at the college there. So, when it tends to be when you rile, not every time, there are certainly plenty of quiet cases that never even get reported, that are self-censorship, so no one thinks of them as censorship, but it was only the fifth graders that could read the book. So there's plenty of negative things, but by and large, when you poke the bear of telling people they can't learn about the world, the bear growls back.
It's a lot of it's about the importance of community and defending challenges and material that people find controversial, right?
Yes, that's the thing. Is if in that instance, Catherine Applegate, or if in the instance, in golly, somewhere elseville, there's been way too many at this point, but there was a wonderful person who runs the local Glisten, Liz Hamer, and I can't remember where she is, but Liz Hamer's fantastic. In fact, she might be Kansas, and the other one was Oklahoma. Oh my gosh, states. But yeah, if no one does respond, that's when it's successful. When no one says, "Hey, wait a minute, why are you hiding that book? Hey, wait a minute, why is that book unrestricted self?" And for every time that an adult, and I will say it is real, you can put your job at risk to say something. It can be scary. It can be terrifying. You can make you. It can be. It can absolutely be uncomfortable. And if you lose your job, that can move into being unsafe. At the same time, if you speak up, you're speaking up for someone who has even less agency than you do. You're speaking up for a kid who is stuck in a home, that can't leave that home, that can't get a new family the way that you could potentially, hopefully, get a new job, change things around for yourself. That kid has no options. So if you can do it, please do.
Alex, I wanted to go back to what you were talking about the event in Kansas, and you said that you're at the college there. What was the outcome? What was the general reaction after that event, and what was the response to that the response to the response?
The response to the response. Yeah, Kansas was the one with Liz Hamer, and they at the Glisten there worked to get. They bought a whole bunch of copies of the book. And great because that's right. The Whoever was in charge there decided that it wasn't that they wouldn't allow the book in schools, but that even though it was on the list of recommended titles, they wouldn't purchase it for the schools. So I talked with some people and we're like, well, we'll just send the books and we'll figure out what they do then. We sent the books, and what Glisten has been able to do is distribute them. And after I was there were only a few schools that would have me at the time. But after I was there were a bunch of other schools that were like, okay, yeah, we'll take a copy. Yeah, we'll take a copy. And it's a slow process. And what the work that she and the people there do is grueling, and day in and day out, and being willing to listen to people say crap and just keep going forth with it. But it is happening, and it's changing things.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. This is a question from our audience. And again, if y'all have any questions for Alex, please add those to the comments on Facebook. Alex, one of our viewers wants to know what draws you specifically to kids' books. And do you ever consider writing for other age groups?
So there's a thing about middle grade authors where people are supposed to have a button that eventually or like a toggle that flicks to adult, and ours is kind of broken. And there's part of me that's 10 years old. About 10 years old is when I loved reading more than even than I do now. I still read middle grade. It's what fascinates me. It's what I love. It's the age where there's a willingness to still learn things. So there's that form of innocence, but there's a growing ability to discern what people agree with versus what they don't. Like when you're 5, an opinion is, do you like chocolate or strawberry? When you're 10, an opinion is, it's like, is it right to treat people wrong if you get something good out of it? And to me, I love that phase. I just do. And I don't hate to say it because I say it all the time. Most adult books are long and boring, and I don't like them. So it's unlike, I might veer up to middle YA. I might eventually have a picture book idea that doesn't completely suck. but mostly middle grade.
We have another question. Says, what are your thoughts about the first generation of books about trans kids? Many feel they may not have aged well. For example, Parrotfish by Ellen Whitlinger or Luna by Julie Ann Peters. Should
Get that
library
book out of your library, not because of censorship, but because it is a painful, harmful book. Luna is a painful, harmful book. It is a book in which the main character is the sister of a trans girl. She's 17, young woman. And the plot of the book is about how hard it is to have a trans sister and how much it ruins this kid's life. And the resolution of the book is it's all better because the trans woman goes off to college, and so it's not a problem anymore. To be perfectly frank, that's horrible. Parrotfish is I don't love it, but it doesn't have that same horribleness to it. Frankly, the only people I want writing stories about transness and about genderqueerness and about non-binariness are people who are in that world, people who are trans. And I don't mean the parents of people who are trans. Those books often come across as, oh my God, look what an amazing adult this kid has in their life. Look how wonderful that is. That is a book for the mom. That is a book for the parent. That is not to say that everyone shouldn't be writing books with trans characters. I want all the trans characters, but I want them being characters. When it is about understanding transness, which, by the way, understanding transness is a very cis-centric notion. Trans people understand ourselves, and it actually doesn't matter if you understand a trans person in order to respect them. I don't care if you understand me. I care if you treat me well. Because I don't understand lots of things in the world. I still treat it well. I don't understand people who choose tea when coffee is available. I don't understand that. But I can put out hot water and Lipton and not make fun of it. I mean, I'm making fun of it because it's tea, but that's not someone's gender, right? Yeah. I am ready for lots of people writing trans characters, and I'm ready for lots of trans people writing books about being trans, and also trans characters and non-trans characters.
So just kind of just let's look at the kind of the positive side. Are there books that you recommend people have in their library?
Yes. More books are coming out. In YA, anything from Meredith Russo is gold. Birthdays is a fantastic book. April Daniels does the Dreadnought series, which is a superhero where her superpower is she got the body she wanted. So she transitioned, and it's phenomenal, right? In middle grade, Lisa Bunker has Zenobia July, which is fantastic. And there's more and more coming out in picture books. When Aiden Became a Brother by Kyle Lukoff is fantastic. Case and Calendar is out there writing great works. There's more and more coming.
Thank you. So we got another question from the audience. This one's from a librarian in training, and they sometimes get overwhelmed by the scale of challenges or backlash. Do you have any advice on how they can stay resilient in the face of that?
Safety in numbers. Find your community, whether it's local community, whether it's people who support you in your library, or whether it's community online. We're doing lots of stuff online now. There are other people facing the same stuff. There are other people who have already faced it and come up with ideas. There are people who can tell you that you will get over it. There are people who can give advice of what to do to avoid pitfalls. Talk with each other. Absolutely.
I think that's great advice. Thanks, Alex. I'm just trying to see my font is really small on my screen. Um, the next question from someone is, any ideas on how to encourage children to read banned books? And I might also just add parenthetically, maybe just to read books in general. I don't know. So
Yeah, right. Because I'd say the best way to get a kid to read a bad book is tell them some adult didn't want you to read this. Oh, why not? Right? Another thing to remember is that all reading is reading. Graphic novels are fantastic, amazing, and they have plots, and they have important things in them, and they have morals, and they have all these great things. Prose is often a long slog. Lots of kids do really well with verse. And I don't mean poetry poems, I mean novels in verse, right? Uh, have them on display, right? In lots of exciting ways. Read yourself. Tell kids about what you're reading and why you like it. Put up, if you liked this, you'd like this kind of things are always great. That's a great way to get kids to read diversely. Like if you like this book about white boy, you'd love this similar book about black girl. But like, they both ride bikes and they both make a candy store or whatever kids do, right? You can also, if you're trying to get them to read and they keep watching TV, right? Like if you like whatever TV show, you'd love like this book that's similar. So connecting it to something that they like and yeah, tell them why you like the book.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we actually, one of our viewers is streaming this live in their middle school. And there's a question from one of the students watching. The student wants to know, do you think that people who censor your book do so because they're homophobic? The student holds the opinion that they are. What are your thoughts?
I love that question. And I love questions from kids because they get to the heart of stuff. Right? Like our questions are much more Dancy, do you think that people matter? No. Are people homophobic? Yeah. People are homophobic, but I want to take apart what homophobia is because homophobo, right? Phobos or whatever it is in the ancient languages, is fear. And it is a lot of fear. And that fear turns into hatred. And so we often think about homophobia as hatred of gay people, of LGBTQ people, but it's based in fear. It's based in fear of the unknown. It's based in fear of different. It's based in, I didn't grow up with that, so I don't know how to talk about that. I'm not used to that. And it's really a shame that one person's closed-mindedness can affect the ability of other people to have their minds opened. That's really terrible.
Yeah. Another question from our audience. Hi, librarian here, and a major fan of George. Both those things are true for me too. Thank you for that book. Do you anticipate your upcoming book to be banned as well, even if it is a different topic?
It depends on whether it gathers steam. It depends on whether the people with nothing better to do than to hate things latch onto it. Because I had a second book come out, You Don't Know Everything, Jilly P. And it didn't get banned, and didn't have queer content, but it had content about racism, it had content about police violence, it had the kind of things that people don't like to talk with kids, but it didn't splash in the same way, so it didn't get banned. Rick just came out this spring, and it is a sequel to Melissa's, not a sequel, but a companion to Melissa's story. So if it makes a bigger splash, it might well get banned. But it's the books, I'm finding books, the books that get banned the most are not the scariest books or the worst books, right? And I'm putting worst in quotes because it's not worse, but like the books that if someone read 100 books and like, oh, I don't want my kid to see this one, that's not the one that gets banned the most. The one that gets banned the most is the one that gets talked about the most. So I don't know. It depends on how much it gets talked about.
And the hope is that they all get talked about, right? That's
That's the trade-off. When I want them to be talked about, but I don't want them to be banned. Yeah.
All right, that class out there is asking some good questions. We have another student question. What inspired you to write, or who are some of the people that inspired you to write?
I'm gonna be all sappy and say my parents, because before I was able to write, they would take dictation and write down my stories. Or at least they told me they did. They could be scribbling for all I knew because I couldn't read at the time. But my dad has always been a storyteller, and my mom has always been a reader and a creative person. And between all of that, I've always told stories. And then once I got a book contract, I realized that I could be an author and this could be my career.
So you've already said you don't, maybe you do read adult books, but the question is, what books are you reading now? Which I'm assuming, do you read adult books, and what are you reading now if not?
Well, what I can say is I'm reading 2 books right now. One of them just disappeared on me, but I had it. It's called 3 Keys by Kelly Yang. It is a middle grade book. It is a follow-up to Front Desk, and it's about a girl and her family that owns a motel. And they're immigrants, and they have an immigrants welcome sign up on their motel, and they're getting less business because of it. I am also reading an adult book, if you can call it that. Ali Broche, who wrote Hyperbole and a Half a couple years ago, just came out with Solutions and Other Problems. And it is comic strips, and her take on depression and despondency and how she lives as a creative person who struggles with mental health issues is so relatable. And I'm delighted that she was able to put another piece out.
Great, thank you. Okay, we got one more student question. The student wants to know, what do you do when your book is banned? Do you file a complaint, or do you sell it elsewhere?
So the thing about being an author is I write the book and then I give it out into the world, and then the world does lots of things with it. So generally, I don't find out about most of the complaints. What happens is someone in a library or a school or somewhere tries to challenge the book, and then someone at that library, often the librarian or a teacher, will complain to the American Library Association, Office of Information Freedom, who's putting on this event, and they tally it all. As for whether it gets sold elsewhere, that's what my publisher does, and they do try to make sure that it gets all over the place. Scholastic will get my book places, and in fact, one of the early things that was fantastic about the book, about working with Scholastic, is in the face of fear about what would happen if they brought a book about a trans kid like into the world, the Scholastic book fairs, which are in so many schools, said, yeah, we're going to be carrying it. And so that, like, schools, I believe, unfortunately, schools can opt out or opt in. Like, there's some choice. They get to choose whether or not it's on the shelves, which is not ideal. But for my publisher's part, they were like, yeah, we will just keep sending it somewhere else.
I'll just name drop Judy, who runs the book fair, is a fantastic lady. She lives here in Montclair, actually. So I'm so glad to hear that, because she's a fantastic person. So, yeah.
And I'm just going to throw in
the
that
OIF is pretty great too.
I just want to throw in that I lived for the Scholastic book fairs when I was a kid. So.
And the pamphlets with the little sheet, and the three books meant you got a poster of a cat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that wish list that we got every week.
Well, and that's why I got a library card, because my parents couldn't afford all the books I wanted to get at the book fair. So that's
Yeah.
Betsy, do we have any other questions that
No.
are nope?
No, and I think we're actually close to our time, so I think it's time
We
to
are.
wrap it up. Unfortunately, I could spend all day here.
Yeah, I just want to say, Alex, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to share your thoughts and your experiences. It's really illuminating and instructive as a professional, but also as a person. Um, and I'm really grateful that your books are in the world, and that you're able to share your talent and your experiences in that way. Um, what do you we've talked about what you have written. What are you writing now? What's coming out? I know that's like an author's worst nightmare, is like, I don't like, do you have things, ideas? I mean, you kind of talked about some things, but do you want to, and where can we find more information about your stuff? Or if people watching want to have you come speak at their library or their school, give us your commercial.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for saying that. It is a delight and an honor to be able to use the first 35 years of my life to, like, the work that I did as developing my understanding of the world as a trans person, to be able to like share that now is fantastic. I have a website, very simple, Alex Gino, Gino, at, excuse me, not at, .com. It has my books. It has a way to contact me. Yes, I absolutely do virtual visits. I just this afternoon, hours from now, I'm going to be participating in the first ever Minorities in Publishing live video podcast, which to me sounds like a talk show. But I think we've come around full circle. Podcasts are now video. I don't understand. But Jen Baker is amazing, and I'm going to be with Mike Jung, and he is also fantastic. He just is next Tuesday comes out, Boys in the Back Row. And as for writing, I am working now on a book that is currently titled Alice Austin Was a Lesbian. And again, if the editor doesn't make me change it, I'm not changing it, because she was. And she was a photographer on Staten Island, where I grew up at the beginning of the 20th century. And she was, in her words, she lived the larky lifestyle. She had a long-term partner named Gertrude, of all things. It was Alice and Gertrude. And my main character is non-binary, and they find out about this person. And when they have a school assignment to propose a potential statue in front of Borough Hall, this is who they propose. And so I really love this idea of this like 19th, 20th century lesbian photographer being the first thing that you see when you get off the Staten Island Ferry. And that's what I'm working on.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex, for being such an advocate for free expression, intellectual freedom, for identity, and joining us today. I also want to thank Peter for being an amazing co-host, and shout out to ALA and the other members of the Banned Books Week Coalition for helping us defend censored material. If you want to learn more about the coalition and how you can support them, please visit bannedbooksweek.org. And please do, if you can, support ALA and the other organizations in the coalition. It's how we are able to do this every year. It's how we're able to celebrate the freedom to read.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll catch you next time.